Hello, hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things anxiety and big emotions. We are doing a social anxiety series, and today we're actually talking about shyness. I'm so excited because I have a special guest, Nadia Finer. Nadia, she's a regular speaker in organizations and schools around the UK. She's appeared on Radio 4, Saturday Live, Women's Hour, the ITV News. She's been in the Times, Guardian, Telegraph, Independent, and in Good Housekeeping. And we're going to discuss what shyness is and all the things about shyness. Embracing shyness is a strength, and Nadia really is that shyness expert. And she talks about it's okay to be shy, and shyness is essential in today's world and being successful in today's world. Nadia is on a softly spoken mission to help shy people to be more mighty. And she's UK's leading shyness expert, the author of 2 books about shyness, in addition to everything else I've already said that she's done, and Shy and Mighty Kids. And I'm very excited to have her on the show today. So thank you for joining us. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's very exciting to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me and for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, it's an important topic. I'm in the social anxiety sort of piece right now, and so this is going to fit perfectly with that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
Okay, sure. Well, I work with children and with grown-ups in organizations and in schools and individually too. I work with shy people, people who feel like their shyness is holding them back from achieving the kinds of things they know they're capable of, or they feel like they're kind of stuck in um, a shyness kind of well, some people call it a prison. They feel kind of like it's blocking them or stopping them from doing things. They're missing out. So I work with people one to one, or going into schools and working with groups of kids, giving talks, and generally being a kind of shyness warrior or campaigner, I guess, trying to raise awareness of shyness.
Okay. And from your perspective, I know a lot, when we look at the anxiety literature, we kind of separate. There's those who are socially anxious versus those who are shy. So maybe if you could just tell us what shyness is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of confusion or discussion about what shyness actually is, and I think that's part of the problem. Um, to my mind, shyness is a social anxiety. And if there was a spectrum, it would be kind of the lower end of the spectrum where social anxiety, or what we think of as social anxiety, almost with a capital S and a capital A, that would be kind of at the further end. Um, some people consider it to be a kind of personality type as well. You could be a shy person, it's part of who you are. Whereas for others, shyness kind of pops up occasionally or in certain situations or when things are new and uncertain, and kind of impacts their life or creates some additional challenges. So they're kind of related, shyness and social anxiety. And I think the other issue is that, particularly amongst young people and on social media, where they are really referring to shyness, they've kind of they use the term social anxiety to describe that because actually, and you might disagree with me, but this is my point of view. Social anxiety is quite extreme. It's a pretty serious thing, something that can be medicated and affects a small number of people. Whereas if you study the number of mentions, for example, on Instagram, of shyness versus social anxiety, you can start to see that people are kind of um, latching onto the terminology social anxiety when perhaps what they're dealing with is actually shyness in general.
Right. So how would you then, it's not a dichotomy. You either are socially anxious or not, or shy or not. There is that sort of continuum. what would you say would be different if you were to differentiate between the two? Are there more strengths? Is shyness is probably not as impairing as social anxiety, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So social anxiety is perhaps something you experience all the time. It's more limiting on your life. So you might feel socially anxious when you're eating in front of others, when you get on a bus, when you're in any kind of group situation. It can get to the point where, every time you leave the house, your social anxiety is a problem for you. Whereas shyness, um, it's more like something that's maybe just sort of part of you, flares up if you're giving a talk or talking in front of a group, but you are less likely to feel shy, just as you close the front door of your house and walk down the road, maybe go and get a coffee. You might feel shy when you're ordering the coffee, but you could probably drink it and be okay and not worry about going to the toilet, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I was going to ask you about that too, because I know, well, even for my own self, I would say I'm a very shy person, but people who see me either, on my podcast or when I'm up on stage or doing anything, I mean, they would say, no, you're extroverted. You are so engaging and easygoing, but one-on-one or in a social gathering, I am hiding behind my husband, shy. So do you see that too, where people might be a little bit more boisterous and outgoing in certain situations and shy in others?
Yeah, and the sort of fascinating thing with it is that it's not the same for everyone. So my experience of shyness is different to yours. And so I think it leads to misunderstanding and confusion because people think, well, hang on, how come you can give that talk? You're not shy. So for me, I've become used to public speaking, going on podcasts. But the other day, after a talk, someone gave me a bunch of flowers and they kind of crumbled. It was so embarrassing. I just wanted to hide behind the flowers. So although I'd got through the talk, suddenly that kind of interaction of being handed the flowers and I felt like people were looking at me differently, it was just super awkward. So you can see how it flares up in certain situations, but not in others. And everyone's experience of it is different. So I can stand in front of 250 people or 1,000 people and give a talk, but if I'm in a room full of, say, 10 people and I have to say, like, introduce myself, I find that really difficult. So,
Yeah.
it's in some ways it makes life interesting because it's kind of it's like a slippery fish, it's different for everyone. And I think that's part of the fascination for me, trying to understand it and help people. And nobody comes with the same, there's similarities, but nobody's experience is identical.
Yeah.
Um, so it's quite a unique experience.
That's important to consider. Now, a lot of the people listening, it's mental health professionals, teachers, parents supporting kiddos, teenagers, young adults with anxiety, big emotions, and shyness. What would be the things that you would want these adults to know and how we support our kiddos?
Oh, it's such a good opportunity for me to talk about it because it's something that nobody seems to talk about. So kids will often get told repeatedly, you need to put your hand up more, you need to speak up in class, don't be so shy. That's the kind of feedback they're getting. So the impact of that is um, it's not practical advice or encouragement. It's kind of the same old, same old feedback, which people don't really know what to do with. You can't change someone's personality. You can't change who they are, nor should you. Um, I think shy people are not broken. We don't actually need to be fixed. So that's a good starting point because I think um, often we're made to feel that we need to change and become an outgoing person, like somehow we are not um yeah, that we're flawed somehow. There's something wrong with us, and that's just not
Mhm.
true. So let's start there.
Yeah.
um, and I think encouraging people gently to find their voice, not somebody else's, um, is a good thing to do. And that does not mean like shoving someone onto the stage because you feel like they should participate in that way. I would say never underestimate the tininess of the steps that someone may need to take in order to build up to doing a thing. So, what I mean by that is, let's say we're thinking about kids speaking up more in class. Well, we need to break it down into tiny, tiny steps that they can take one by one and almost have a plan that they're going to do one thing after the other, culminating in them putting their hand up and sharing something in class. And then once they've achieved that, then the next goal might be okay, now we're going to aim for them to stand at the front of the class and share something. But the steps to get there will be tiny. So whether they need someone to be with them, whether they start by, putting their hand up and asking a question, let's say, would be a thing to aim for before they share some sort of well formulated argument, like a tiny
Right.
thing.
Right.
And I think ask them what they need.
Mhm.
It sounds so obvious, and yet for some reason it's not happening. People don't ask, what do you need? What do you need to help you to do this? How can we make this easier for you?
Right.
Um, if we can also encourage quieter people to take control, like there's options. Does it always need to be done the way it's always been done? Do we need to always have to present our work in front of the year group? I see kids traumatized by the fact that they have to do public speaking in front of hundreds of people. Like that's a massive big deal. So
Mhm.
maybe for some kids, even being in that room is hard.
Yeah.
Just being there, let alone standing up and, you know, doing a piece of like oratory genius. That's a lot of pressure. So maybe looking at the way we do things and, is it possible to share work in writing, share feedback in writing, have some huddles or one-to-ones? Do we always need to be doing things in big groups? It's not wimping out, it's kind of warming up and building up to it rather than feeling like, oh, you're giving them the easy options somehow. Because in the future, I'm a shy person. I find like phoning someone difficult. I get nervous before doing something like this, but I can do big things because I've practiced. If I'd have had that support when I was younger, maybe some of the things that I find scary would be fine by now.
Right. I'm the same way. I actually took my voicemail off my phone just because calling anyone or even receiving calls can be so anxiety provoking.
Hmm.
Um, and I think you raise a really good point about collaborating with the kiddos. I'm always talking about we have to have the confidence that kids can do anything. If they want to go up and do an hour-long presentation, we've got the confidence that they can, but we don't want to push them. So it's going at the step and at the rate that they're, I don't want to say comfortable with, because we want them to stretch a little bit. If they always stayed only in their comfort zone, we probably wouldn't get anywhere. So what they're willing, they're bought into, if it is those baby tiny steps, but we got to kind of follow their lead on that.
Yeah, I think of it like comfortable courage. So
Yeah.
it's being brave, but just you don't want to be so brave that you've got the shakes and you're gonna throw up, just a little bit brave because then you can do that again the next day and the next day and the next day. If it's so anxiety inducing and scary, you're gonna need a lie down and a rest for like 2 weeks before you try again.
Right.
And you may never want to. So I think it's logical, but also putting a strategy in place. I've not really been to a school before where they're talking about this and helping the kids to have a plan, to address this and work on it logically. And say, right, what's the goal? What are these steps going to be? Let's break them down. Let's make them a little bit smaller, even. And every time you achieve one, we're going to, I don't know, give you a gold star, and at the end, you get a big prize, whatever it is. Just being that kind of logical. Because if you do that and then you do it again, you do it again, it builds. It's about being
Mhm.
consistent. So I would like to see people talking about shyness. Um, it's not a shameful secret. I get messages from people in their 60s who tell me that this is the first time they've ever like told anybody that they're shy.
Wow.
I know, and I was kind of the same, like, the experiences that I had, I never told anybody what I was going through or how I felt. I just kept it to myself, and it can't be a surprise because 'cause we're shy. We're not really keen on talking anyway,
Right,
so
right.
we just hold it in, and I think if, me going around talking about it helps people to realize it's okay, and suddenly in schools, the kids are talking about it amongst themselves or saying, I feel shy in this situation, or so do I, then it becomes part of the normal human condition. Because ultimately, like in the UK, 57% of people are shy. In America, it's about 40%. It depends culturally from country to country, but on the whole, it's sort of 40 to 60%. And 99% of people have felt shy at some point. So
Right.
everybody has some, pretty much at some point. So
And it
it's not
is
so rare.
it is so important to talk about because I worry about, we've got our socially accepted kiddos who they're usually the outgoing, popular, everybody wants to be their friends, everybody knows them, they're at the center of attention. We've got the socially rejected who's still usually the center of attention, but for not so good reasons. They're disruptive and acting out and bouncing off the walls and, weird. But then I worry about these kids, they're the socially neglected because, and
Yeah,
especially, you know, parents might not see how they're interacting. They might fret and worry at home, but maybe not doing anything in the class. They usually slip through through the cracks because they're quiet. They sit nicely, right? And
yeah,
so they're just, oh, they're doing good. And so that's the piece that I worry about.
me too. Um, I've been told it's, they fly under the radar. And I like to think it's, like the silent potential. It's the silent potential in every classroom. But then it's the silent potential in every meeting, in a workplace, in society as a whole. It's not just schools and kids, it's people, adults, and it blows my mind because you start to think about our institutions, healthcare, the legal system, like everywhere. Like how many voices are not heard, people that don't feel comfortable speaking up. But for kids who are shy, they don't cause trouble. They're not being disruptive. They're doing their homework probably. Most of the kids I work with are not, perhaps not performing at their best, but they're not bad students. They're conscientious. But the problem is they're not putting themselves forwards. They're missing out on opportunities. They're under the radar. They're, people are not really noticing them, and they're frustrated because they know they can do better. They want to be part of it. They want to join in, be involved in activities and extracurriculars, but they're not. And so I think often the first sign is that kind of feedback from the teachers. Maybe parents don't even know what's going
Mhm.
on because the kids are not necessarily telling their parents,
Right.
I feel shy in this situation, or I'm struggling with the group dynamics, or socially, or I didn't go for the play or the performance, I didn't put my name down. And, teachers, not wishing to generalize, but I've spoken to lots of teachers about this. You don't tend to get many shy teachers
Mm.
because
Never
of the
really thought of that.
nature of the
Yeah.
job. So there's a lack of understanding sometimes because or even frustration from teachers who think, well, what's up with them? Why are they not taking part? Maybe they're not interested or they're a bit disengaged. Um, so they don't really kind of understand how the kids are feeling. So I think there's definitely work to be done there in supporting them. And it honestly doesn't take much to make a difference. You
Mhm.
know, when I work with kids in schools, after a few sessions, it's, it's good in a group, like a small group, because they get to practice. But after a few sessions, they start feeling more comfortable. They've made friends within the group. They start putting their hands up. They feel like it's okay to be them. They don't need to change and be this kind of loud person or somehow, fake it till they make it. They can be themselves. And so quite quickly it does have an impact, but the problem is that this is not widely spoken about. I feel like I might be the only person who talks.
Well, you're right. Like I really think that it is. And I work even my teenagers, but adults now who've always felt like they never had anything important to say. They always thought that they were an afterthought because they wouldn't be the, oh my gosh, I gotta invite Susie to the party. It's when everybody's at the party, somebody's like, where's Susie? And they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot Susie. And so that really over time breaks people down because they feel like they're always an afterthought. And it's not that nobody loves them or doesn't want them to be there. They're just so that they are sort of that wallflower that it's really easy to just hide and be forgotten, even though they're well liked. And I do worry
Yeah,
about it.
I think it's easy to be overlooked and underestimated and to feel like your voice does not matter or that you don't matter. I think it kind of comes sometimes from a feeling that you're not important or that people don't value you. And that can actually make your feelings of shyness worse. Like
Mhm.
one feeds into the other. So it just goes round and round in a loop and leads to more hiding. But then that plays out, in school, obviously, like with social stuff, but then, oh, we're looking for volunteers to do this, to work on this project. We're looking for people to put themselves forward to apply for this university, or there's a job here. Who wants to kind of submit their CV? And when there's a feeling of competitiveness or competition, we stand back and think, oh well, I haven't really got anything to add, or I'm not worthy of that. And it's been entrenched in you from years and years of feeling like you're on the edges. And then you can see how, as an adult, that plays out. You're not going for promotion or asking for a pay rise or applying for the job, or you feel like maybe handling that job interview at all is too much.
Right. Yeah. So,
So,
and it's not like you said, this isn't something that we need to fix. There's nothing wrong. I think, well, maybe I've got a couple of questions, but what would you say are some of the strengths of shy people?
well, this is such a good topic and something which I wish I had thought of when I was a kid. It did not occur to me for one moment that there were any positives to being the way I am. But the kids and the adults that I've met and the research I've done, we have so many strengths. And even if you just try not to think about the negatives for one moment and think about the positives, like, sure, we don't like being put on the spot, but what's the flip side? Well, we love to prepare. And since when is that a bad thing? Being prepared is a good thing in loads of situations. Sure, we're not talking all the time and we don't love the sound of our voices necessarily, but we like to listen and observe and see what's going on and think about things in detail. We're not driven by fame or accolades. Like, that's embarrassing, actually. But quality of work and purpose, that stuff means something to us. And maybe we don't work the room and love like being social butterflies and talking to hundreds of people all at once. but we like strong connections, like we're loyal and we get to know people properly. And once we know them, we care for them and they become an important part of our lives. And it also cannot be coincidence that a lot of writers, me included, are shy. Maybe speaking and trying to be kind of coherent and articulate under pressure is difficult, but we can write well because you can think it through, and review what you've said and look at how it might be interpreted. So, you can see there's just a few, but it's the flip side. There's a lot of strengths, and we tend to focus on the fact that we're not this and we're not that. And oh, look at her over there. She's so this and so outgoing and so loud. And she's so good at dancing and singing, and everyone seems to love her. And we wish we were different instead of thinking, actually, do you know what? I've got two really good friends. I'm a brilliant friend. I'm loyal. I'd do anything for my friends. And, when I submit work, it's of a real high quality because I do it properly and I think things through and I come up with good ideas and it's well observed.
Right, right. And I think that that's important in our brain. I always talk about on my show this negativity bias where we do only focus on the negative and we downplay some of those positives. So when working with kiddos, how do you get them to embrace that shyness, to see those strengths and not just telling them? Because I know when we just tell them, they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And we can actually make them feel worse, but get them to really buy in and embrace that.
Yeah, I work with them kind of over a number of weeks through a sort of process. I mean, it's not a fixed process because it depends on the kid. If I went in there on week one and said, hey, you know that thing that you've been struggling with for ages? Well, I'm telling you, it's a superpower. They would probably just not listen and tell me to shut up. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that doesn't work. We build up to it gradually. And I think the first few weeks are really just trying to talk about how they feel about being shy, what it's like, when it happens, what happens in their body, um, how does it impact their life, and what would they like things to be, how would they like things to be different? And then from there, we do little exercises and games and just start getting them to build their self-esteem up a little bit so that they can see that, maybe then, firstly, they're not alone. Let's look out for other shy people at school. Like, we tend to think everybody is this extreme outgoing person, but that's just not true. If you look around the class, you'll see that actually there's, maybe five of you who are quite quiet, and it's maybe three or four people who are dominating all the conversations. So why are we focused on them? So we just do little games and activities to try and build their bravery muscles. And then I'll introduce the idea that maybe the thing that they've told me about, maybe music or art or writing, might, that's their strength. Then why is that something to be dismissed? Like, why should that be less important than the ability to stand in front of the class and present?
Right. Yeah, that's great. Have you ever had a kiddo who says everything's hunky dory, nothing needs to change, I'm fine being shy and being the wallflower where we're trying, but we know that it would do them good to be a little braver in their life?
Yeah, sometimes they say things like the other day I was working with a boy who, he said, oh, school's like 8 out of 10, it's fine. Like I'm getting on well in my lessons. But I just keep kind of asking questions and putting them at ease until eventually he said, well, actually, school stuff's okay, but I struggle to understand what's going on in social situations. And, that's an interesting statement in itself. And I wanted to understand whether, like, does he not understand what, like, what they're actually saying? Or, and it turned out, he felt like he wasn't being included. So he kind of missed stuff. So there were in jokes and things like that that he felt he was missing out on. And then we talked a bit about girls,
Mhm.
because it's a mixed school. I think you guys say co-ed. And
Mhm.
he found it difficult to talk to girls. So on the face of it, things were fine, but actually there's a few things he would like to work on. I just give kids the opportunity to ask me for help with the thing that they need help with, and I think because I understand and have a kind of soft approach with them, and I'll tell them stories about the things that happened to me when I was a kid and the things that happen to me now, they feel like it's okay to tell me, and then we can work on it just a little bit at a time.
Right. And I think that that just kind of reminded me, I think there's a couple of things that we need to look at. One is perception, because I think a lot of these kiddos perceive themselves as incompetent, inadequate socially, even though they might have beautiful social skills and it's not a skill deficit at all. It's just their perception. And these are the kids who say, nobody likes me, I have no friends. Meanwhile, they're getting birthday invites, they're having play date invites, but their perception is that they're unsuccessful, versus the children who really do have some skill deficits that could work on some social skills, knowing how to initiate an interaction, maintain an interaction, understand those jokes and, timing and all of those kinds of things. So I think it's important for us to sort of tell what's going on for this kiddo. Is it more a mindset thing, or are there actually skills that we could be working on, or both? Oftentimes it's both.
Yeah, often it is both, and it could just be that they almost need to start by doing a little bit of work. So perhaps researching, like, what do they want to talk to people about, or here are some, what do these things that people are saying mean? Like actually looking into it, but that plays into their preference for research and preparation, using those skills, versus understanding, like you say, that even the people who seem popular and outgoing, like everyone has doubts. It's okay to mess things up. People make mistakes or look silly or fall over or spill things down them, and that's fine. Like life is a mess, and it's okay not to be perfect all the time. So there's, like you say, there's stuff around perception, and then there's practical kind of skills that are going to help them, tools really, that are going to help them to interact, or maybe um, start friendships or follow up on things. Often, I think kids expect perhaps relationships to just land in their lap, and they don't realize that, maybe the person who sat next to them who said hi was trying to start a conversation and make friends. They don't realize that they need to say hi back and maybe could
Right.
ask questions about their day, or, you know, share something
Yeah.
that they've seen that's interesting, rather than just kind of expecting to go from hi to will you come to my party.
Right. Actually, that reminds me, my daughter came home yesterday frustrated. Mom, I need to get pencils. I just bought her pencils, like a whole pack. I need pencils. What have you done with your pencils? This boy that she actually has already said a couple weeks ago that she thinks he's kind of cute. He keeps asking me for a pencil, and every day he's asking for a new one because he's lost the one that I just gave him. And I'm like, last night, I'm like, I think he likes you. Like, I think that's his way of ensuring that he has to come to you to have some sort of interaction. And, because she's very, very shy, very, very shy. And I think she misses a lot of these types of things as well. Right. And so her thinking about it, she didn't say, no, it's not. Because I've, in the past, I wondered, no, it's not. But this time I think she's actually starting to think about these different interactions and how can I be different? Because normally she's just, here you go, and then quiet, and then back to my work, but not trying to continue the engagement. So I just was kind of reminded of that.
That's so cute, but also, like, he might be really shy, and the only way he can talk to her is by asking for a pencil.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And these are high
Oh,
school students. So, yeah, it's kind of awkward. And I think social media, texting, like, I think it's taken away the art of conversation and communicating face to face with each other. I think this younger generation has really missed out on a lot of important developmental opportunities. And then the lockdown, of course, with COVID, I mean, that robbed them. So I'm seeing kiddos who are just almost traumatized coming back into school this year, those early elementary kids who just are clingy to the teacher and trying to self-soothe. And it's just because it's overwhelming and they've never had all of this interaction in the loud classroom. So I think, it's going to be interesting the next few years, just seeing how these kiddos turn up, because I would say the shyness prevalence has probably increased quite a bit just because of the lost opportunities. But
I would say so, definitely. And I think that um also social, like the more extremes, social anxiety, people that never had anything like that before now do. But the quieter kids, the shock of coming back into school, having been at home, maybe with just your parents, maybe a couple of siblings, back into rooms filled with like many loud people bustling around a school, having to kind of fight for attention or to be heard. It's quite easy to go, oh, actually, I might just not bother. I'll just stand back and see what happens. And if nobody's kind of paying attention or watching out for those kids, it's very easy for that stepping back and missing out to become a habit.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I could go on forever about this because this is definitely a topic that I'm passionate about, and certainly you are as well. Any last minute tips, things, considerations that the adults in a shy child's life should know about?
I would say watch out for the signs. Like if you're getting those kind of mentions from the teacher, needs to put hand up more. Um, Ask your kids what they need. Like, how can you support them? I would also, I am biased, but I would recommend my book for
Yeah,
kids
yeah.
because it normalizes shyness. It explains how and why, and has lots of suggestions for things to do that will help. Also, if you're worried about your kid, I get messages from parents a lot, so feel free to message me. I'll get back to you. And I would say just make your kids realize that it's okay. Perhaps share a story of a time when you were shy. And it might not be that you consider yourself to be a shy person, but you probably have had a time where you felt a bit uncertain or a bit like you wanted to hide. So talk to your kids so that they feel able to talk to you about it, because the last thing we want is for them to bottle it up and just keep quiet about it, and it kind of grows and grows and becomes something that's quite difficult to handle later on in life.
I think that's such an important point. And I'll put your contact information, links to your book in the show notes. And that is like the normalization piece, because I think a lot of them will bottle it up and feel like they're the only one. And over time, shame settles in, depression settles in. We're looking at, something that's beautiful that we can embrace that turns into a mental health concern when we don't talk about it and we don't normalize it and embrace it. So
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy to talk about. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And like you said, if you don't talk about it, which we have a tendency not to do because we'd rather not talk about very much,
right.
it does lead to kind of not great things later. So if you have a shy child, um I would love it if you over dinner or whilst you're driving, just mention the fact that you heard this lady from England talking about shyness today, and it reminded you of a time when you were shy, and it's okay, and that it's a normal human experience or emotion, and or personality type, whatever you want to call it, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. We all feel shy sometimes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.